This case was hidden because someone knew too much. But today, I will tell you how a simple missing person report spiraled into something far darker, far more dangerous than anyone cared to admit. For years, no one dared to speak of it. Now, I am risking everything to leak this story because the truth is still out there, buried beneath layers of silence and complicity. It all began in Akron, Ohio, in the summer of 2011. A teenage boy, Michael Carter, vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no ransom demands, just gone. His family reported him missing on June 14th after he failed to come home from a friend's house. The local police took the report, but within days, the case went cold. Or so they thought. I was part of the task force assigned to follow up. At first, it seemed straightforward, a runaway maybe, but something about Michael's case didn't sit right. His phone activity stopped abruptly, yet his social media profiles remained active for days afterward. No signs of distress, no obvious motive, just silence. Now, here's where it gets strange. I dug into the records, public and private, accessed DMV data, school files, CPS reports. Nothing suspicious at first glance, but then I found a pattern. Michael's family had a history of small financial troubles. His mother, Danielle Ruiz, had occasional employment issues, minor debts. Nothing criminal, but enough to make me wonder. Was this just a typical case of a lost kid, or was something else going on? One night, I reviewed surveillance footage from the neighborhood. A figure, shadowed, seen near Michael's house around 8:45 p.m. on June 14th. Not much, just a silhouette. But I knew, from experience, that shadows often hide more than they reveal. I ordered a deeper check. Who was that? Why was he there? Then I stumbled upon a strange detail. A neighbor, Marcus Hall, had reported seeing a suspicious van parked outside Michael's house that evening. A van with a fake license plate. I requested the footage from the local security company. The tape was tampered with. Deleted. Would you have noticed this detail in the file? Probably not. But I did, and I knew it was a clue. Something was being hidden. Over the following weeks, I learned that Michael's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident. Several minors in Akron had vanished or disappeared from public view, only to reappear in whispers. Never officially found, always untraceable. I started digging into shadow networks, underground clinics, ghost accounts, fake IDs. I found evidence of a shadow operation, a kind of black market for minors. The more I uncovered, the deeper the rabbit hole went. A clandestine group, operating under the radar, call it Operation Red Moon, was trafficking minors for unknown purposes. They kept their operation hidden behind legitimate fronts. Fake clinics, ghost employment agencies, shell companies. They even manipulated local authorities, using unregistered minors for illegal experiments, or worse. And here's the chilling part. The families involved. Some knew, some pretended not to. Danielle Ruiz, Michael's mother, was linked to a shadow clinic under a different alias. She helped facilitate the transfer of minors, including her own son, to these clandestine sites. Did she do it out of desperation, or was she part of a larger network? I can't say for sure, but her silence was deafening when approached. Now, I must admit, I doubted myself more than once. Did I imagine it all? Was there a mistake? But then I found official records, FOIA requests, police reports, court documents, altered or redacted. Someone was trying to cover this up. The breaking point came unexpectedly. I received an anonymous tip, an internal memo from within the police department marked confidential, warning me to back off the case. It referenced family loyalty, unofficial pressure, and discretion. I called it a bluff at first, but then I realized I was being watched. Betrayal cut deep. I discovered that officers I trusted had been paid off, that some had connections to the shadow network. My investigation was compromised. I was threatened, subtly, to drop it. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I pressed on, going against the grain, risking my career, my safety. I uncovered that the operation had expanded beyond Akron, linked to other states, even national networks. But then, suddenly, my leads dried up. Files vanished, witnesses disappeared, and I was reassigned, silenced. Until that final night, I found an unmarked envelope on my doorstep. Inside, a small piece of paper with a handwritten note. Stop digging, or next time, you won't walk away. Signed with a strange symbol. I knew then I was onto something much bigger. And Michael? He was found, if you can call it that, in the basement of a neighbor's house, in a closet, He had been there for days, alive but terrified. His story was fractured, incoherent. He talked of shadows, of voices. The police dismissed it as trauma, but I knew better. I knew he was a victim of something more sinister. The operation was dismantled, or so they claimed. Several arrests, some forced disappearances, quiet settlements. But the network, I suspect, still survives in shadows, hidden, waiting. Would you believe it if I told you the truth is still out there? That the files I leaked only scratched the surface? Maybe not. But ask yourself, if this had happened in your family, what would you have done? Would you have trusted the authorities? Or would you have searched for answers beyond the official story? This isn't just about a missing boy. It's about how much we choose to ignore, how many secrets we bury behind closed doors. If you've listened this far, you're searching for the truth. Subscribe, I'll show you the next case. These files rarely survive to the end. Subscribe while this one is still here. And remember, every day, I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment, because the truth, sometimes, is more dangerous than you think. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. This story doesn't end here. I wish it did. Because the deeper I dug, the more I realized how fragile the line is between truth and cover-up, and how easily that line can be erased when power and silence collide. After the initial chaos, I thought I was done. But then I uncovered a secret document, an internal report from the Ohio Department of Human Services, dated September 2011. It was marked, "For official use only." It detailed a special task force that had quietly been assigned to monitor minors connected to the case. The language was vague, but the implications were clear. Some minors, including Michael, had been assigned to undisclosed locations, under undisclosed authorities. I cross-checked the addresses listed in the report. Several of those sites no longer appeared in any public records. They had simply vanished. I requested records through FOIA. Nothing. Files had been redacted beyond recognition. Someone was removing evidence, fast and thorough. And then I remembered. The shadow network extended beyond the borders of Ohio. I found hints linking it to a covert operation known internally as Operation Red Moon, a code name I had only heard in whispers. I traced some of the money flows, cryptocurrency transactions, shell companies, leading me to a network of quiet, offshore accounts. Were these miners being trafficked for experimentation, for organ harvesting? I couldn't say for certain, but I knew enough to be terrified. Would you have suspected the very system meant to protect children could be weaponized like this? That agencies sworn to serve and safeguard could be complicit? I've seen enough to doubt everything, and I still wonder, how many other cases like Michael's are out there, hidden behind layers of bureaucratic silence? One evening, I found an encrypted email thread, an exchange between a high-ranking official and an unknown recipient. The words hinted at covering the operation, protecting the families, and maintaining the silence at all costs. I saved the files, but I knew they were only part of the puzzle. Someone was watching, and someone was controlling the narrative. Then came the betrayal I feared most. I received a message, an anonymous voice on the line, warning me to drop the case, that I was playing with forces I couldn't understand. I didn't recognize the voice, but the tone was cold, calculated. I realized I was being manipulated, pushed into a corner. My own colleagues, some of them had turned against me, and yet I pressed on. I tracked down a whistleblower who had once been part of the operation, a former technician at one of the shadow clinics. He told me about the experiments, about minors who were taken for undisclosed procedures. He described a network of underground facilities hidden behind legitimate businesses where children like Michael were kept, manipulated, broken. Would you believe a single family could be so deeply entangled in this dark web? Danielle Ruiz, Michael's mother, she was not just a victim, she was an active participant in the machinery. She helped transfer minors, kept silent about her own son's fate. She knew the truth but chose loyalty over justice. I can't forget her face the night I confronted her. She looked at me with hollow eyes, pleading, unable to deny what she had become part of. I wanted to ask her why. Why would she do this? But the words caught in my throat. There are questions no one wants to answer. The investigation finally reached a breaking point when some of the evidence I'd collected mysteriously disappeared. Files, witness statements, even a recorded interview with Michael himself. Gone. I realized the operation was larger, more entrenched than I had feared. It had allies in high places, people who could make evidence vanish overnight. And then, in the quiet aftermath, rumors started to circulate about a cleanup crew, about a series of accidents involving those who tried to blow the whistle. I won't say I believed all of it, but I knew at least some of the truth had been buried. The final blow came when I was forced into retirement under the guise of downsizing, but I knew they had silenced me, just like they silenced many others. I left with the files, the evidence I could salvage, and a heavy conscience. I knew I had only scratched the surface. Now, I sit here, recounting these events, knowing full well that the system I once trusted is riddled with cracks and shadowed by secrets. Michael Carter's story is just one fragment of a much larger mosaic of corruption and betrayal. If you think this is the end, think again. Because the network still exists, hidden beneath the veneer of normalcy. And every day, somewhere out there, another child might be taken, another secret kept. The question is, how many of us are willing to look behind the curtain? Would you have believed it if I told you this was happening right under our noses? That the very institutions we rely on could be involved in something so sinister? If you've listened this far, you're already searching for the truth. Subscribe. I'll show you the next chapter. These files rarely survive this long. Subscribe while this story remains accessible. Remember, every day I'll post another case, another glimpse into the darkness that lurks behind closed doors. Because knowing the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, is the only way to confront what's really going on out there. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next leak. This story is far from over. In fact, it's only beginning to reveal its darkest layers. After years of chasing shadows, I uncovered a link I hadn't anticipated. An entity operating far beyond Akron's borders, with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of government and law enforcement. I found evidence pointing to a clandestine alliance, a secret society that protected the operation at all costs. It started with a simple lead, an unregistered bank account flagged during a routine financial audit. The account held millions in crypto, manipulated through complex chains of shell companies. I traced transactions to a shell corporation registered in a small Delaware LLC, Crescent Ridge Holdings. No employees, no physical address, just a mailbox in Houston. But the money was moving fast, quietly fueling the operation that had already claimed too many lives. I discovered that Crescent Ridge was just a front. Behind it, a network of individuals, politicians, judges, corporate executives, many with ties to the shadow clinics. The same names kept recurring, whispered in hushed conversations among whistleblowers, anonymous tips, and leaked documents. Did these people know what they were complicit in, or were they just pawns? I don't have all the answers, but I know enough to be afraid. Would you believe that some of these figures had publicly supported child protection initiatives? That they sat on committees, signed laws, and yet secretly profited from the trafficking? It's a sickening double life, a lie wrapped in a veneer of civility. I found records of campaign donations, legal loopholes exploited, and even blackmail evidence, damning proof of a systemic cover-up. And here's the kicker. I found a file labeled Operation Red Moon, Directive 17, a top-secret plan outlining how to keep the operation hidden from oversight. It described disinformation campaigns, controlled leaks, and distraction narratives to divert attention. I realize now that the entire investigation was part of a larger game. Someone wanted me to find just enough to be dangerous, but never enough to stop the machine. What looks most suspicious to you in this story? The fact that the system failed to protect those it was meant to serve? Or that it actively worked to conceal its own crimes? I ask myself, if this were your family, how far would you go to uncover the truth? Would you trust the authorities, or would you suspect everyone? The betrayal hit hardest when I learned that some of the whistleblowers I'd spoken with had been silenced, discredited, threatened, or worse. An old investigator once told me, if you want to hide something from the public, just make sure they never hear about it. And that's exactly what they did. They buried the evidence, wiped the witnesses, and left the victims in silence. I had one last hope, an encrypted message from an insider claiming to have proof of a covert meeting in Washington, D.C., involving high-level officials. I managed to track the IP address to a secure server. I downloaded the files, but before I could analyze them fully, my access was cut. The servers were shut down overnight, as if someone had pressed a button to erase everything. Did they succeed? Or was there still a fragment left behind? I can't tell you for sure. But I do know that the deeper I looked, the more I realized the operation was not just about trafficking minors. It was about control, over information, over people, over the very fabric of society. And Michael Carter, his story is just one of many. I've spoken to other families who disappeared into the shadows, never seen again. Children who vanished from foster homes, from hospitals, from plain sight. How many of these cases are still unresolved? How many victims still cry out in silence? If you think this is the end, think again. Because the real nightmare is that this network still operates, hidden behind layers of deception, protected by those who stand to gain. The question is, are we willing to see the truth, even if it's ugly? Or will we continue to turn away pretending it's not happening? Would you have believed it if I told you that the system itself could be the greatest threat? That the people we trust the most might be the ones hiding the worst secrets? If you've listened this far, you're already part of the investigation. Subscribe. I'll show you the next chapter. These files rarely survive this long, and I'm risking everything to share them. Subscribe while the truth is still accessible. And remember, every day I'll post another case, another glimpse into the darkness that's been hiding in plain sight, because knowledge is the only weapon we have against the monsters lurking beneath our very noses. Stay vigilant, stay cautious, and I'll see you in the next leak. This story isn't finished. In fact, every new discovery only deepens the mystery. After I thought I had exposed everything, I found an encrypted archive hidden within a server in a remote data center in Nevada. It was labeled Project Exodus. I managed to crack the encryption, but what I uncovered was more disturbing than I'd ever imagined. Inside, there were files, photos, audio recordings, internal memos, some labeled with code names like Operation Hollow Moon and Cleansing Protocol. The files hinted at a planned mass removal, resettlement of minors, in secret, to undisclosed locations. They weren't just trafficking children. They were removing them entirely from public records, erasing their existence. I saw photographs of children kept in stark, windowless rooms, some alive, some seemingly not. The files suggested experiments, medical, psychological, behavioral, done without consent. The operation was not random. It was systematic, orchestrated at a level that made my stomach turn. These weren't isolated crimes. They were part of a larger, sinister agenda. How many children have been taken? No one knows for sure. The official numbers are fabricated, manipulated. I found evidence suggesting thousands, maybe tens of thousands, disappeared over the past decade, and I suspect many are still unaccounted for. The system, the shadow network, continues to operate under the guise of national security, public safety, or medical necessity. Would you have suspected that the very institutions designed to protect us could be involved in such horrors? That the government, the law enforcement agencies, even the medical community could be complicit? It's a bitter truth, one that I wrestle with every day. One of the most chilling files was a series of recorded meetings, high-level discussions among officials. They used language like disposal, reassignment, deniable operations. The phrase, cleaning the slate, kept recurring. I realized then that this wasn't just about individual trafficking. It was about systemic removal of inconvenient witnesses, dissenters, and victims alike. And Michael? His case was just the beginning. Many of the children who disappeared from Akron were part of this larger operation. He was a pawn, a piece on a chessboard that stretched across the country. I've spoken with former insiders, people who once worked at these clandestine sites. They describe underground facilities filled with children, experimental chambers, and security protocols so tight, no one could breach them without risking their lives. The betrayal cuts deeper when I consider the families. Families who had no idea what was happening to their children. Some were threatened, some paid off, others simply silenced. I found records of families being paid hush money, told their children had run away or were placed in safe foster homes. Lies that covered up a far more sinister reality. I must ask, what looks most suspicious to you now? The fact that these disappearances are dismissed as missing persons, or that the official investigations are hurried, redacted, or outright blocked? Why has no one blown the whistle on the entire system? Because many of those whistleblowers are gone, discredited, or disappeared. It's a chilling thought. The people running this operation are protected by layers of secrecy, by a network of silence. I've seen it firsthand. People who try to expose the truth get silenced, threatened, or worse. That's why I keep risking my reputation, my safety to leak what I've uncovered, because if I don't, who will? Would you have believed that the real power lies in the cover-up? That the highest levels of government and law enforcement are intertwined with this dark web? It's a truth so ugly, it's almost unthinkable. But I have the evidence, I have the files, and I know it's only a matter of time before someone tries to erase everything. So I ask you, if this were your child, if your family had been affected, how far would you go to find the truth? Would you be satisfied with the official stories? Or would you dig deeper, even if it meant risking everything? If you've listened this far, you're already part of the investigation. Subscribe, I'll show you the next chapter. These files rarely survive this long, and I'm risking more than I can say. Subscribe while this story is still accessible. Remember, every day I'll post another case, another fragment of a hidden world that most refuse to see. Because knowledge is the only way to confront the monsters hiding behind the masks of civility. Stay cautious, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next leak.